Do you have children? Could you imagine your life if your children were ripped away from you? That's what parental alienation is. Parental alienation is a trick that abusers use to accuse you of any array of things to keep your children from you. It is a painful, horrible thing that the court systems really don't know who to side with. And very often, the abusive father or mother ends up with the children. I speak to people all the time, and it is a terrible thing for not only the children, but the parents. So today, I've got a special guest for you, actually two guests, my friend Carolyn and her daughter Kaitlyn. I've known Carolyn through the Coalition Against Domestic Violence, where we were on a survivor caucus together. She's actually taught me so much about parental alienation. She had not seen Kaitlyn in 8 years. And today we're going to talk with Kaitlyn and follow their journey as they share with us everything that we need to know about this painful and heart-wrenching type of behavior. So without any further ado, let's welcome them. Let's start off with telling me, how did you lose your kids?
So, in order to really tell the story, I think, successfully, I almost have to go back to when I divorced my ex-husband. And I was in a very abusive relationship with him for almost 10 years. We had 3 children from the marriage. And in 2007, I caught him having another affair, and our son was just literally born. The night that I was in the hospital, he was at a hockey game with somebody else. And so that was kind of the final straw for me. And I filed for divorce. And because of his domestic violence and other things that happened, I was awarded sole decision making of all 3 of our children. At the time, I had a newborn, a 2-year-old, and an 8-year-old. Our divorce was finalized in 2008. During our divorce, I think it's important for people to know too that I was a recovering alcoholic, and I had relapsed during our divorce. And I only say this because it gave him ammunition to really use against me at times. So anyways, so I had relapsed, and for about 4 years, I was taking care of the kids. I was running a business. I was taking care of our home. But because of bad choices and my alcoholism, I found myself in another abusive relationship. And again, more ammunition that my ex was able to use against me. My ex was the type of person, though, that if he, when he couldn't get his way, he would call the police on me. And when the police wouldn't do anything or intervene, he was taking me back to court. And when the courts wouldn't do anything, he was calling social services. So it became this vicious cycle of, the police officer showing up at the door, court papers being served, or, having a caseworker showing up at my front door to interview me and my children. The final year that I had custody of my kids, I later found out that he had called social services on us at least a dozen times, and started having friends and family calling social services. And so I eventually had a dependency neglect case opened up in our county for child abuse, and I fought it to the best of my ability. I got clean and sober during that time. However, the judges and my court-appointed attorney and the caseworker and others really had no idea what parental alienation was, and they kept hearing stories from my kids about how they didn't want to be with me, how my girls felt that they were unsafe with me, and it really escalated the parental alienation. This was also the first time in my life that I ever even heard the word parental alienation, and it was from the gal who did our supervised visitations at the time with my kids. My youngest daughter, Brianna, had come into a visit right before I was visiting with my other 2 children. My youngest daughter, Brianna, came in to a visitation when I was visiting with my other kids, and right before the visit, and she told me that I was dead to her and I was no longer her mommy, and that her stepmom was now her mom. And I tried incredibly hard to fight back those tears and enjoy the time that I had with my other 2 children. And that was the first time that I had heard that this was parental alienation. I had asked the therapist, I said, what am I doing wrong? I said, I really don't understand what I'm doing wrong. And she said, "You're not doing anything wrong." She goes, "I think it's parental alienation." So I ended up losing custody of the kids through the dependency and neglect case. And I still had visitation with my son. And I also had court-appointed phone calls with him twice a week. So I was seeing my son on a regular basis for a year after the dependency and neglect case. But the girls really weren't going to come around. In fact, in the final motion, the courts allowed verbiage to say that I would not contact the girls until they contacted me first. And my ex has really used that as though it's a full-blown restraining order against me. And he shows that to schools and doctors and anybody else that he thinks that I might try to get in contact with. Anyways, so with my kids, it was kind of like a light switch went off. And one minute I had a very loving, caring relationship with them, and then the next minute they wanted nothing to do with me. And my ex kept telling me it was things like, they hate you for what you've done to them. I can't believe what you've done to them. You've never taken responsibility for your actions. Drugs, alcohol, and men are much more important to you than your own kids are. And none of that was true, but that's what he was telling the kids. My youngest, Ryan, he was, like I said, I saw him for about a year after all of this. And then when I was going through getting more visitation with him and trying to set up visitation with the girls, or at least to get into some kind of counseling with the girls, another fictitious allegation of sexual abuse came up against me and the person that I was living with when the dependency and neglect happened. To this day, I don't know what happened. I certainly didn't know anything about it. But however, it was about that same time that I ended up not having a relationship with Ryan. And so anything I did or didn't do was always used against me. If I tried calling Ryan, and my ex would tell me that he didn't want to talk to me. And I probably went a good 2 years of texting my ex on my court-appointed days when I was supposed to talk to him, and never getting anything back from him. No response, nothing at all. And so anyways, it was in 2012, 2013, my relationship with my kids really went into complete darkness. And that was 7 years ago, with no contact, no pictures, not hearing their voices.
That must have been so hard. How did you deal with the pain?
Wow. How did you deal with the pain? You just do. The pain was unreal. I mean, it's the worst thing I've ever had to go through. I've said, from a domestic violence or relationship abuse standpoint, kick me in the face, punch me in the face, throw all your words at me, ruin me financially, personally, but don't take my kids away from me. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened.
Were you able to fight for them during that time? What'd you do?
I didn't fight for them in the traditional way, as far as like going back to court. I knew that if I pushed the courts to reverse things, and let's say they did. Let's say they totally reversed things and they gave me custody of the kids. Or let's say they did 50-50 with me. He's not going to follow those court orders. I really don't believe he would have. And I also think that he would have made life more difficult for the kids, as well as for me. And I also know how deep his hatred is for me, that I think that my life would have been in danger if I had gone the traditional route. So I went a different route in standing up and telling my story to anybody and everybody who had listened. I learned more about domestic violence and what parental alienation was, and I started getting more involved with other people that were going through the same things that I was going through.
And you educated yourself, because we met at the Coalition Against Domestic Violence.
That's
so
right.
You have been an advocate as long as I've known you. What kinds of things were you learning that were helping heal you and sort of resolve this I can't be with my kids feeling?
So I had to kind of understanding that this really is a form of abuse. I really do believe that it is grounded in power and control over, having that power and control over somebody, and using the kids as a pawn through all of this. I don't believe that, there were any safety issues. There was no reason for any of this. My children and I had a very loving relationship before all of this. And it also became one of those things that, it just baffled my mind. I couldn't understand it. I couldn't grasp what was happening. And so I tried to educate myself as best as I could in understanding what domestic violence looks like, getting involved with domestic violence, and then also kind of going, butting heads with the domestic violence community, because they don't necessarily recognize parental alienation as a form of abuse. They see it more as a way of abusers using this to get the children, saying that the mother is alienating the children from their father, or vice versa, and in a way to protect the children. So I learned a lot. I definitely learned a lot.
Did it make the pain go away?
No, the pain never ever went away. For me, it really became more of a shift, of mind shift, knowing that someday they would come around, and when they did come around, I wanted them to see a strong mom. I wanted them to see somebody who continued to fight for them, even when I couldn't fight, even when I felt like I couldn't stand up and fight for me. But I realized too early on that, and this may sound silly to some people, but that's the way I got through it, is knowing that we were still in the same story. We just weren't in the same chapter. And the ending still hasn't been written.
That's true.
And so that's what I held on to. I also held on to, I believe in a higher power, and I believe in God. And, just like a parent would tell a child no, we don't tell our children no because we don't want them to have something. We tell them no usually to protect them. And so I had to look at this also as a way of being protected, that if I continually fought for my kids, or if I pushed the issue with my ex-husband, or let's say I was even still married to my ex-husband, there's probably a good chance I wouldn't be walking around today.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, this story is a happy ending. And so what I would like to do now is introduce your daughter, Kaitlyn, who came back, 8 months ago now?
Almost a year.
Wow. All right.
Oh, it'll be a year in 2 weeks.
Awesome. All right. Well, this is what we're here to do, is to talk to Kaitlyn as well as yourself. So let's talk to Kaitlyn, and we'll connect up all in a second. Welcome, Kaitlyn. I'm so excited that you are here.
Me too.
So tell me, how old were you when your mom left, or when you went right into your dad's custody?
Ooh, about maybe 10, 11 years old.
Okay. And what do you remember about life before being alone at dad? If you were 10, do you remember memories with mom?
I do. They were probably one of my favorite memories, as it was just the four of us. And my favorite one to tell about my mom is, it was the first year my mom and my dad got a divorce. It was Christmas time. And I looked at my mom and told her, how are we supposed to have Christmas if it's just the four of us? And actually, one of the Salvation Army people who rang the bell told us that we were probably one of the most happiest families that they've ever seen. And that is still my favorite memory to this day.
Nice. So, what did your dad tell you that you're not going to see your mom anymore? I mean, I think that's such an important part of the child's journey in this. Do you remember what he said, or did he say something over the years?
He kind of said that my mom was going through some stuff and that she needed to figure it out on her own. And it was more of a personal battle, is how he kind of put it. And I mean, I don't know how you explain this to a 10-year-old, that your mom's being taken away from you. But he kind of basically told me that my mom's going through a personal battle and didn't want us anymore.
Okay, that's good. What was life like at Dad's house?
It was hard. It was either his way or no way. It was constant battle of my step-siblings and I fighting. I was constantly grounded, constantly doing chores. I felt like I had no freedom. I felt trapped in a place I never should have felt trapped. And it was a scary place. I was scared.
So your dad remarried, and you had a stepbrother and a stepsister?
I had 2 stepbrothers and a stepsister, and we didn't get along very well. It was just one of those step-sibling relationships.
And were there things that your stepmom and your dad did to kind of separate you guys?
Yeah, there was a lot of favoritism. It was a constant fight of who did what chores, and my step siblings did nothing. It was constantly all of us. My brother and my sister and I think we did all of it, and it really felt like we were almost Cinderella in a sense, and it sucked.
Yeah, I remember you telling me a story when we had dinner at Christmas time about your own room and how you wanted a room, and to me that tugged on my heartstrings. Can you share that a little bit?
Yes. So I 17 and had to share a room with my she's a 10 11 9 or 10 year old sister. And at 17 you have this privacy. You are a teenager, and I almost got that privacy taken away. But my stepsister, who's only 2 years older than me, gets her own room. And it's not fair. It's either you give everyone their own room or you don't at all. And I brought that up, and I got told, sucks to be you. You're not the oldest, and deal with it. And I actually got in trouble, and my sister got to pick the room. And so I lived in a bright pink zebra room until I was about 19, and I was just done.
Wow. And so when you were there at Dad's, did you miss Mom?
I did. There were certain things, especially like when holidays came around, it was heart-wrenching, especially in the first year. I felt like I missed my mom probably more than I normally did. And like first day of school and birthdays. And then as the years went on, it started to lessen, because I figured the more I miss Mom, the more my dad pushed me away.
Yeah, that had to be really hard. Were you allowed to talk to Mom or have communications? Did she send gifts?
So I wasn't allowed to talk to Mom. I wasn't allowed to talk about Mom. And if I talked about Mom, I got told, shut up, basically. I wasn't allowed to accept gifts, and if I had to return them and I couldn't open them, nothing. My mom, I guess, apparently sent me a yearbook, and I had no idea, and they sent it back. I've lost a lot of communication.
Yeah, that had to be really hard. I know that alienating parents tend to take credit for the good parts and blame us for our bad parts, like you're just like your dad, or in this case, you're just like your mom. So if you were being bad, did he ever pull that kind of trick on you?
He really did. If I got called a liar once and told I'm just like my mom, I look just like my mom, I act just like my mom. It was so bad once that they were trying to scare me straight. They actually had their cop friend throw me in handcuffs and throw me in the backseat of her police car to get me to stop acting like my mom.
How old were you when that happened?
Probably about 10. And a 10-year-old getting thrown in a cop car and handcuffs, it's scary.
Yeah.
And I have all my siblings sitting there laughing at me, saying I deserve this.
Wow.
My brother and my sister, who know I'm nothing like what they called me, are laughing at me, telling me I deserve this, and that I deserve nothing more to end up in a jail.
Oh my, I am so sorry, honey. That is a terrible thing to have happened to a 10-year-old. Traumatizing, really.
It is. I still have trouble with cops because of that. I don't trust them.
Mm-hmm.
And there's someone who's supposed to protect me, and I can't even look them in the eye.
Yeah. Did your dad keep you also away from your grandparents? Were you allowed to see any of your extended family?
No, I was told I had to block them on Facebook when I got a Facebook. Told I wasn't allowed to call them. My grandma tried to call me every year on my birthday to talk to me. Wasn't allowed to answer the phone call. I never got to talk to my uncle or my cousins. I just recently got in contact back with my uncle.
Okay. So Kaitlyn, how old are you now?
I am 20 years old. I just turned 20 about a week ago.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Yay. This video will go on for the next 100 years, so, that's all right. People will know that you are stuck at 20. So what was the moment that you decided to call your mom?
So about in 2 weeks, it'll be a year that my dad actually kicked me out. I don't remember why he kicked me out. It was such a blur that day. But he told me to basically, and mind my language, to pack a bag and get the fuck out. And so I did that. And then my stepsister cornered me, punched me in the face and scratched me in the face. I actually have a scar at the corner of my lip where she left a mark. And I walked to my boyfriend's that day. And I sat there for about a week and a half going back and forth with my boyfriend. Should I call her? I felt, and it was one of those, should I call her? Is she going to be mad if I call her? What am I going to do if she yells at me? Or what am I going to do if she doesn't answer the phone? And it was a lot of what ifs. And finally one night I lost it. I decided I needed an army to storm a village. And I picked up a burner phone that I had bought, so I had contact with people in my life that needed to get a contact of me, and basically sent my mom a text message saying, "Hi, it's me, and I hope you're not mad at me, and I love you, and can you call me, and that I need your help." And she automatically texted me back asking if she could call me. I said, "Yes, please." And we sat on the phone for about 2 hours that night. And the next day we saw each other.
Wow. So Carolyn, tell us how that text was. Like, were you right on the phone and you just saw it and went, oh?
Pretty much, yeah. It's one of those moments that you think is never going to happen as a parent. And you pray and you hope that they'll reach out to you. You just don't know when or where or how. And it was late at night. It was probably about 10:15 or later, and my husband and I were already laying in bed and not quite asleep, but just about there. And I heard my phone go off, and I looked at it through very blurry eyes, and it said, "This is Kaitlyn." And I was like, "What?" Of course, I'm now wide awake, and I'm hitting my husband saying, "It's Kaitlyn, what do I do?" And he's like, "Well, ask her if you can call her." Like, oh, well, that never really dawned on me at 10:15 at night when your daughter that you haven't seen in 7 years hasn't contacting you. That definitely didn't dawn on me. So, so we spoke, and we cried a lot that night. And I asked her, I said, "When can I see you?" And she said, "How about tomorrow?" And I said, "Perfect." And I literally dropped everything that was on my schedule to go spend the day with her. And I just made 2 requests of her. I said, 1, I don't want to be on this side of town because that's where her dad lived. And I really didn't want to run into them. And I said, 2, I won't bring up anything, but if you want to bring up anything, I will answer any questions that you have. And we took it from there. I said, "Do you want to go see my house?" And she said, "Yes." She came over and she saw where I lived, and she met our puppies, and she and I went to lunch, and everybody wanted to see her. My mom wanted to see her, my husband wanted to meet her, and I wanted, I didn't know how she was going to react to this whole new family that she was, walking into, and I kind of put everybody at arm's length and, just let's just take this slow. But all by herself, she said, "I want to see Grandma. I want to meet your husband."
Nice.
And all of that happened that day. And, we've been in communication every single day since, and I've had her back to the best of my ability, and we've cried a lot still, and we've laughed even more. We've talked about memories, and
Speaking of memories, there were a lot of things that you both missed in each other's life. Can you think of one thing that you both had? So Carolyn, tell me first, something that you really maybe knew that she was graduating from high school or something like that. that was tugging on your heartstrings?
Every day. I mean, every day missing out on your child's life. For all three of them, I think about how many firsts I missed. The first date, the first kiss, the prom, first days of schools, my son losing his first tooth, or just so many firsts that I missed out on, and not being able to be there for them on their huge milestones, their accomplishments, not being able to celebrate those accomplishments with them. Those are things I'll never get back. There's no memory to make except for I wasn't there. That's the memory.
Yeah. And you got married while you were apart, and that had to have been sad to go through and think, wow, I wish my kids were here.
I did, and I even made a special, I purposely put into our vows my children and their names and how much that they are missed. And my husband put in his vows that the moment my children come back into our lives, he will be there with open arms, and he will love them as though they're his. And so those were part of our vows that day.
Yeah. And how about you, Kaitlyn?
Mine was probably applying for colleges and graduation. I was lost. I didn't know what I wanted to do. My dad was no help. And my dad was one of those people, if you had anything below, it would be you're failing. And so I was stressed in high school, and so I missed my mom. I missed having her there and having her basically guide me. I didn't have a guide. And so I missed her during those moments. I missed her hearing her scream my name at graduation. Missing having and being her there for me when we went prom dress shopping and homecoming dress shopping, and just being my mom. I think I missed the most. I didn't have that figure, and so I think missing her there was probably the hardest.
Whoops.
Yeah.
Double tissue moment. I'm sorry that you guys missed all those things. But now you get to write new chapters. You get to change the way your future is. But your siblings are still there. Are you worried about them?
I am. I actually have nightmares about it. And I'll wake up and the next morning I tell my mom, I feel something's wrong. Something in my gut does not sit right. Mm-hmm. And I feel in a part of me, we're connected and we're still connected. And so it's just, I'm waiting for that phone call of, I need someone to come get me, and I'm not going to skip a heartbeat to be there for them.
Are you allowed to talk to them?
No.
No. So tell me what happened.
Only if it's on your dad's terms.
Yeah.
Oh. My next question is, you guys have missed so much of each other's lives, and you're rebuilding everything. How do you move forward from here?
You just, I think having the love that we have for each other and the strong foundation that we already have is enough for us to continue to build on what we have. The bond was never broken. And I think that's one thing that a lot of parents need to understand, is that the bond is unbreakable. And I really do believe that the bond is unbreakable. Our kids are trapped just as much as we are. And they're probably being abused more than we're being abused. Especially when there's this kind of a darkness that has happened. Our relationship was completely severed. I know some kids may never come around. But I think it's our job as parents to still get up and show up for life and put our best foot forward every day, as painful as it is, and I understand how painful it is. But if they should come around, I know for me, I wanted to still be the best parent I could be. And if I fell deep into that depression or the anxiety or the PTSD that I have suffered because of having my children severed from my relationship and from my life, I'd be a wreck. And I wouldn't be there for her today. And I don't think she'd want to be around me if I were a wreck. And so I think it's really important for us as parents to try to get through that to the best of our ability, because in reality, our kids are probably suffering more and going through more painful experiences than we are.
Yeah. And one thing that, we've been friends for a couple of years now, and one thing that I love about you is that regardless of how dark things were, you held on to the light and you held on to the hope. And when I talk to people that are going through this, I always tell them about you, despite the fact that it's not a three-way happy ending. It's take little steps and work towards it, and when they're ready, have the hope and the spirit inside of you to know that they will come back one day, and to know that, as you always said, I want them to know that I've always fought for them and I've done everything. And now you're coaching and talking to other parents,
Yeah,
right?
well, a lot of people used to ask me, why don't you just go back to court? Just take him back to court. You're court ordered to have this time with your kids. None of this sounds right. Judges just don't make these types of decisions, right? And I chose not to go back to court. I chose to fight a totally different way. I chose to speak up and fight. And through this journey, I have testified at the Colorado State Senate and House of Representatives on numerous bills to help victims of relationship abuse. I've talked to, countless professionals and told them my story, and trying to convince them that this is a form of parental alienation is a form of relationship abuse. I've met professionals who believe the way that I believe, that this should be a form of relationship abuse. I've looked at 50-50 custody laws. I've looked at, what causes somebody to do this. And through that whole entire journey, it's brought me to more clarity in my own personal life and wanting to give back. I knew a long time ago when this first happened that this was a story that needed to be told, but at the time I didn't know how to tell it. And over the time, I've been able to really tell my story a lot better and tell it to more people that are willing to listen to me, because I was so afraid to tell my story. I was so afraid to be judged. Like, what kind of monster must I be to lose custody of my kids and not have a relationship with them? And I was so afraid of what others would think. And the more I spoke up, the more I realized that I wasn't a monster. And it became a healing process for me by speaking up about this. So yes, I have started up a coaching business. It's called the Parental Alienation Coach. And it's got 3 different prongs to it. One is really advocating and coaching parents so that they can get to a place and be so much stronger and understand exactly what's happening in their relationship with their kids. And if they're in the beginning of the relationship, giving them those resources so they don't lose contact with their kiddos. The second piece of it is to do a lot more public speaking across the country and to really put the correlation between parental alienation and domestic violence. I really feel that since there are so many laws that are already written in our Constitution, our state constitutions across the country around domestic violence, that if this became part of that umbrella, then it would change the dynamics in the court system. And then the third piece would, and this is probably down the road quite a ways, but ultimately being able to train the professionals. But really being there for the parents in the beginning, because I know their pain, I understand their frustration, I understand this makes crazy people. I've been there before. I've wanted to take my own life, feeling like I don't know if I can go on with this. But I made it through. And so I'd like to give them that encouragement and help them find their own strength and help them find their own voice, so that what has happened to us as parents and our children isn't done without some kind of merit behind it. Being able to, I guess, turn lemons into lemonade kind of thing.
Yeah. Now you mentioned something in that, and I didn't want to interrupt you, but one of the things that I know is something that happens is and maybe the proportion of alienated moms versus dads, because the moms that I've talked to feel like they're in a minority, and so when you're all of a sudden without child, it's really hard to explain that to the, say, neighbors, the Joneses. Why don't you have a kid? Where are they? What did you do?
Yeah.
I mean, that stigmatism is always with any alienated parent, where
Yeah.
the blaming happens. Oh, you must have done something wrong, you know. But how does it feel? And talk about the stats on the women and men versus there, if you have them. But how did it feel to have to explain this to people that might not understand this?
Oh, it felt very judgmental. I felt like I must be a monster. You know, our society is one where we feel that, you know, moms tend to be the more nurturing parent. And there may be a lot of scientific and evidence that proves that is the case. You know, we do tend to be more of the caregivers. And so the courts tend to favor moms over dads because we're more of the nurturing parent. Does that make us the better parent? No, I don't think so. I think children need to have both parents. So it was very, very difficult to explain. You know, I had people who were very judgmental, and then I had others that were incredibly sympathetic and said, wow, you know, that happened to my sister, or, you know, my uncle had that happen to him. You know, so when I got to the point where people were kind of judging me, I knew that that wasn't my audience. Or it was an opportunity to educate them too, to understand. You know, we do have in our society, even with the relationship abuse, you know, we want to say, well, why doesn't she leave? You know, she's such a nice girl. Why doesn't she just leave? And it's not that easy. You know, leaving an abusive relationship is extremely difficult. Well, this is what happens when you can leave an abusive relationship and you have children, is that the abuser can use that to their advantage to continue to hurt you. I also believe that there are levels of alienation, and some parents may not even know that they're doing it. You know, a perfect example is a mom alienating from her ex-husband, you know, the kids, because she's realized that the more overnight she has, the more money she gets. And, you know, there's also an anger level, you know, when you divorce somebody that you are supposed to have this life with. And I think it's just time for a lot of us to grow up in that regard, you know, and stop, really look at what's right for the kids. What's right for the kids is to have a relationship with both parents. And if it is an abusive situation, there are ways to put things in place that will protect both yourself and your children. There's ways to exchange the children so that you don't have to be with your abuser. There's way for the children to have a relationship with that parent that is in a safe, nurturing environment, then that's possibly supervised. But that doesn't mean that they shouldn't still have a relationship with them. It's their choice to choose how they develop that relationship with the other parent. That's not my choice.
Well, guys, this has been an amazing interview, and I am so grateful for both of you to have the courage to talk to 1 million people on YouTube. You won't be scared, will you, Kaitlyn?
No.
No. Good. Well, I really, really am so grateful for this opportunity to bring your story and give hope to parents who might not have this experience yet, who don't know what to turn, where to go, and what to do, and how to get support. So thank you guys, both.